Good day. Welcome to the spring in the UK. I'm Sam, this is Relove Guitars. Not done any videos for the last couple of months, I don't think, well nearly. Just had a busy time doing kind of other stuff getting in the way. Also though, I have to say it's been a very quiet period in this part of the country for setups, and that's partly my fault because I don't really do much in the way of promotion. So locally, yeah, I kind of keep my head down a bit, but also there's something in the air. It seems that people who would normally send stuff to me for setup, you know, from overseas and whatnot, have just been holding back a bit. It seems it's just, all I can do is measure it on the volume coming through, and it's not been very much compared to other years at this time of the year. But anyway, in some ways that's kind of convenient really, because it's just coincided with other stuff that's had to be done, and you know, we've had sort of some health stuff to deal with Claire's in particular has a back surgery coming up very shortly, so that's kind of important to get out of the way, and that's next week. So we've been a bit focused on that, and just a few other things. So anyway, that's just by way of saying nothing bad happened to me, and I'm still here. So what I'm just doing right now is this is basically the beginning of a video for this guitar. I've got in my pocket. I've got the pot for Sam's guitar, so I'll put that over there. So what we've got here is Jay's Antoria archtop, classic vintage archtop from the 60s or late 50s but early 60s. So this is a kind of beautiful looking simple old guitar from that era, and this is, you know, the classic archtop design, end mounted strings, floating bridge which you can put anywhere you like, and raise and lower, and then an overhanging neck piece. And Jay was asking me the other day why they did it that way, and I guess the only simple reason, I guess, is because it's the best way to accommodate the arch top underneath. With a modern flat top, obviously you can attach this part to the top, but on this sort of design where you want the moulded top, then you obviously have to float that last bit of the neck over the top of it, or last bit of the fingerboard. That does create some problems, because I can even see from here there is some degree of there's a little bit of a hump here, but that's not the main problem this guitar has. This Antoria is slightly different from the first one I had, in that this one has metal in the neck, so it's kind of, it proudly declares itself trussed. Nice. It's an ever true neck, a trussed, ever true trussed neck. But as you can see, there's no adjuster, so this is sort of steel reinforced, but you don't really have much of a chance to alter anything. Interestingly though, when you do kind of just check it out a little bit, there is definitely a hump just about there, with a sort of a gap, a secondary gap. But generally speaking, it's not under load, but even when it was under load, it didn't have that too much of a permanent curve in it. But, or should I say, it was less than the other ones I've worked on, but it still would probably be something worth ironing out with probably the same technique as I used on the other ones. Anyway, but that's a secondary thing. On this guitar, the first thing that struck me is the action. This is slackened off, but you can see the bridge is pretty much down on its level, and the action when this is done up is humongous, so there's nothing you've got left to adjust. And so when Jay first sent me the pictures of this, I couldn't see all of it, so I wasn't sure what was wrong with it, so I suggested he bring it over, which he did, and then having a look at it, it became quite quickly apparent what was wrong with it. And I don't know how well you can see this, but there, the side, I guess we can call this the side, has pulled away from the back. which then distorts the shape of it and allows the neck to pitch forward. And I'm not going to do it too hard, but when you, from where I can see it now, there's quite a bit of movement in all things here. There's also a feeling that there's some separation here at the neck heel, but I don't think that's so bad. It's not apart, but it's just, it has kind of, there is some feel of movement. I don't want to crack it apart, because actually what we'd end up with are some separate bits. We'd have the neck from here downwards, we'd have this glued to there, hopefully strongly, and then this bit sort of coming away. So my first thought with this, and what I said to Jay, this guitar, first of all, economically it doesn't make sense really doing a lot of work to this, because even in nice condition, these were never, they're not top-end guitars. They're sort of a, you know, a mass market sort of thing. But having said that, they have a really nice, you know, for people who like old things, it's definitely got a sort of personality to it. You know, Jay said to me that he wants this guitar for his kids to, or grandkids even, to play. So this, in a sense, comes a bit, is suddenly a bit outside of the normal sort of scheme of things. Let's say if we were able to glue this back and structurally secure it, and then go ahead and do the sort of similar work, refret, but first of all pull the frets, flatten the neck with some sanding to get it re-flat, and then we'd allow hopefully the strings to just pull a tiny bit of relief into it. But you know, refret as on the previous guitars, so that we get a nice new guitar out of it, a nice new playing action. I can even see this moving just by pressing this. That's how flexible this currently is. Then it would probably cost about £250, and that's probably relatively cheap in terms of the time that goes into it. But you know, that's what I would charge for it, a full refret, and fix this bit that's broken off or coming apart. So economically, as a resale thing, it's not worth it. But as something that matters, you know, you want to pass it on in the family, and it has a kind of personal significance, then it's different. It's worth spending money on if that's what you want to do. So what I said to Jay was that the first thing is, I will, without any kind of obligation, I will look at cleaning this face up here. I've kind of prized it a little bit further around, so I'm going to make myself a little sanding tool and get in there and just clean up these faces, and then we'll get some fresh glue in there. I want to try and see what the structure is inside there, because I can't quite tell. But then the idea will be to clamp this thing long ways, so we pull these two things together and then clamp that a ways too. And I haven't figured out exactly how I'll do that yet, but we do need a combination of this pushing this top part back under the back of the guitar, and then something holding those together. Now, they don't have to be huge forces, but it's about creating enough stability to allow it to really stick and bite. My concern was that if we're only dealing with this plywood edge as the only kind of gluing surface, then it's not a hell of a lot of material, probably hence why it's come apart in the first place. But I'm thinking that down the centre, I'm pretty sure down the centre there is a solid block which maybe gives us a bit more of glue surface in here, which I'll try and get a look at as we go through, but I won't really be able to show it on camera because yeah, I can't really get up that close. The other thing with this, just a little detail, is although with the bridge you can kind of move the strings to a line, they're really flexible that way. This one, like the 12-string Echo I just did, this one is also positioned slightly off centre, which doesn't really help. So ideally we'd want to reposition that so that the tailpiece and then the bridge will kind of be more in harmony down the centre line of this neck. But again, I would do that afterwards, because I'm not really sure exactly what this neck will do when we put it under load. Like I say, it may be that this will come apart, and if that's the case, then we got another game altogether. And it may be that the whole neck comes off, which I haven't done before, but it's kind of, if it's 2/3 of the way, then it's a slightly different, probably a slightly different arrangement to modern acoustic guitars, but I'm not sure So I'd rather it didn't. I'd rather we could just glue it as is. Anyway, that's my plan. So, and like I said, if once I've glued that, it doesn't become structurally strong enough to warrant doing the other work to the neck, then I've said to Jay, I'll let him know, and we'll just stop at that point. In no obligation or charge, because this bit's kind of just it's kind of curiosity value for me. I enjoy seeing if I can fix something to a certain point. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to put on a bit of double-sided tape onto this thing. This is actually an old StewMac fret protector kind of thing, but I'm just going to take that off, and then I'm going to give myself some double-sided sticky, and the idea would be just to grip some sandpaper. Kind of like this, and then fold it over. In fact, I'll just drop it on there and I'll cut the first bit. It's quite crunchy sandpaper, so it's a little bit hard to cut first go. There we go, not too bad. And then fold this bit over, comme ça, and then cut down here. So this is 120. I could have probably done with a little bit less sandpapery, but that's all we had down at the market yesterday. So this is my little temporary sanding file. It's actually quite thick, possibly thicker than I'd want, so I could also make another one from another fine. I have some finer sandpaper elsewhere, so I could make a finer grade using a smaller nut file, a thinner nut file. This is quite chunky, or even a feeler gauge blade. But let's see. I mean, if we can get in, I can prise it a little bit, and we can get in and see. So alongside this Antoria, I've also got a couple of things kind of needing doing now. I've got a fender, USA fender, that needs a setup preparatory to sale, but it had a spinning pot, so I've had to wait a while for this one. This is kind of the closest copy. It's I've forgotten the name of the brand, but it's the closest copy to the original Fender 90s Fender pot. Now, what I'm looking for, I don't know whether you can see this, probably not terribly well, but I guess I'm going to end up wanting to get in there to clean the surfaces. So I need a little bit of wedging or prising going on. So something like that. See, it's quite flexible. So, and I can also get a bit of a look in. So you can see that this way gives me quite a good access to the surfaces. I won't bore you with this noise for very long, but that's the plan. And then I can probably prise it open with a couple of other things. Not sure which ones. Maybe would that do? No, that's a bit blunt. That one's a bit no good. What's that one? That's a bit chiseled like. I have to be careful putting my hands up there because I get come into contact with spiders pretty quickly. So even a bit of a truss rod cover here from something else. Get it under there. There you go. So again, what I'll do is I'll get a torch into it a bit later on and try and see what the lie of the land is. I could technically take the whole back off, which arguably would sort of give us a stronger grip and a better view of what we've got. And actually, if we needed to add any slight bit of bracing, then we could. What's interesting is I think I can. I'll do it with tape, but I can pretty much see the central block here, which means we do have a good, we've got a very good surface to work with. So inside of this tape, we've got the block, which comes to about there. Not a very good indicator, but I guess what I'm saying is all of this here around this area, because obviously it curves away, so we'll lose the grip from about here onwards. But I think we can pretty much safely say that everything in there is a surface that can do a gripping job for us. Obviously with this there is some flaking of lacquer, which we could probably finish off a bit later with some amber, just to kind of tidy it up, but it's never going to be perfect given what's happened to this old beastie. But so basically with that there and done like that, I would probably get in there like this and do as much cleaning up of this surface as possible, given that I know I'm working on the flat top of the bracing block in there, and then this bit here is no longer on the block, so it can feel that this bends more easily now. But again, it's the same principle, just trying to clear off the old glue. Yeah, it looks okay. So like I say, you can never, when you break when the thing breaks and it breaks a seal of lacquer, you can never really, you can't pretend that didn't happen. That's the price of this thing coming apart. One thing that's a little bit difficult to do here is we've got a lip on this heel, which means you can't quite, have to go sideways a bit, but it's not perfect. Anyway, that's just a bit of fun. My plan is to just spend a little time now and then working on cleaning this up. Then I'll come up with a sort of jig arrangement which will ideally both clamp down and backwards at the same time. We've got a nice strong structure down here to place the other end of the clamp, and I've got these long clamps that will do that job. The challenging bit will be how to put this under pressure without over stressing the neck bit here. It doesn't need a huge amount, but we need to support under there without over pressuring the top and so on. So it's going to be a bit of a dynamic balance between all those things, and for all I know, in fact more than likely someone like StewMac probably sells a tool for doing exactly that, but because they're great, they sell a tool for doing absolutely everything, but obviously I don't have that. So I'm going to do it the slow hand way, and then by the end of the weekend into next week I'm hoping that we get a sense of how structurally integral this thing is, and obviously we won't have this kind of bending going on anymore. And then leaving these strings on, which Jay put on as fairly new strings, but we're going to use those as sacrificial basically. So for now, in the middle of next week I can then put it under load again and see what the neck does, and that will give me that sense of whether this is worth going on with. Because if it isn't, there's no point saddling a youngster with a guitar that will may be impossible to play. No matter how much sentimental value or how cute the old guitar is, it would be counterproductive to put somebody off playing the guitar with a horrible unplayable thing. So anyway, yeah, I'll save you the boredom. I'll just keep that sort of prized open like that, and I'll move on to other things. Come on, get in the thing. Right, yeah, hopeful, kind of quietly hopeful for this. Right, so I'll get off and do that. See you for the next stage of that once I show, once I've worked out how to brace it. I'll probably draw it out and then I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so just a quick revisit of this Antoria. Basically, this is as good a bite I'm going to get on this with the clamping and so on. So I've got two clamps pulling inwards from there, as you can see. That's pulling the neck up. Actually, I mean, I could support it a bit more, but would that help it? A little bit of extra pressure on there? Yeah, maybe a bit more rather than less. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. So we've got the two clamps pulling in. It's a bit messy. I'm going to have to clean that up afterwards. But two clamps pulling the whole of that section underneath the top, and then we've got this two clamps pulling downwards close to nearer to the edge, so they're pushing on that edge, which curves away after that pretty quickly. So it's a kind of a limit to where we can put the pressure on it. Anyway, so that's that, and I'm going to leave that overnight now at this point, and then I think what I'll also do is I'll move it and leave it clamping over the weekend and see, get as good a fix as we can, and then really just put the strings, or do the strings back up in a couple of days time and see if that's done the job. I put as much glue into this patch here as possible, because that's where there's a, the flat part of the top meets the block. Yeah, see what we get. Anyway, yes, that's my attempt. So we shall see. Yeah, that's all for now. Right, that's Sam's Fender Strat wiring, ready to go back in tomorrow. Enough for now. Good morning in the world of Relove guitars and sheds and stuff. Busy couple of days. Oh, there's my headphones. This moment here, I'm going to reveal the monster that is this. This is Jay's Antoria archtop from a long time ago, and it's one that I have we are attempting to glue into appliance. Basically, this you've seen in the first bit. I'm not going to repeat everything because you've just seen it. For me, it's a day apart, but for you, it's like a mere split second. So I'm talking silliness. Anyway, so here we are. Time to release the Kraken. Release the Kraken? Whatever. Now, I've got to pull hard on this, or is it the other way around? Why isn't it coming off? Partly, it's probably a bit glued on the end here. Yeah. I put paper on it, but it just got a bit sticky on the paper. Just want this out of the way for a minute. Please help and comply. So, couldn't do this without a little bit of overspill, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of potentially a little bit of damage to the finish on the top edge here. Kind of difficult really to avoid, because once it starts spilling, or once the glue starts running, there's not a lot you can do to stop it when you've got no access to the space. But in principle, it's not a bad little outcome so far. And we take off this, and actually pound for pound, that's a little bit of clean up there. That's not at all bad. Result. Now the main question is, how does this affect the overall geometry? And we just have a look down here. This is all pretty much lined back up as intended. Like I say, maybe a little bit of hand lacquering to clear this off, and there's some bit of glue to scrape away carefully. But actually, that's not a bad outcome. And then under here we've got a little bit of foam block to encourage out, a little bit of support. Now this puts us in a different ballpark now. In fact, that leaves the bridge just still a tiny fraction too high. Before it was massively too high, so there was no hope at all. With this, we now have a chance to take a bit off this bridge, and we can bring this down to a place where this will play. Now the geometry of this at the moment is the first fret action is quite high. So if we capoed it, we want to go to about there and lower. I'll say lower the action, but it's governed by the 0 fret. So well, it is at the moment, but I guess that what we said in the last bit is that all of this, though, the next stage for this is really entirely dependent on how it behaves now after gluing. I'm going to put it a little bit under load, but not that much. Now the thing about these things is you can get a replacement bridge for these really cheaply, or inexpensively is probably a better way of putting it. But actually, as an action, you could almost play that now. Yeah, but you'd still want to come down a little bit, and then what we've got is probably a bit too much of a curve on here still, which is the permanent curve that I'd like to take off. So it would be a case of providing over a couple of days now this holds and doesn't change, you know, judging on the integrity of this joint here, then definitely got an option to continue to work with this neck. So I'll just take a couple of shots of this. But in the case of, if we continue with it, what I'll do is I'll aim to flatten this neck out completely, re-equip it with frets, a new 0 fret appropriate for the kind of action that we've got on it. But it's quite difficult once you reset it like this. You kind of, it's hit and miss because you don't know what the new geometry is going to be. If you're just gluing the thing back into shape, there you go, that's a good way of judging it. It is quite difficult to just to gauge it. You sort of have to go with whatever the geometry of the guitar tells you once you've clamped and glued everything back into shape, and then work from there. And it suggests what needs to happen from that point. But I'm pleased with that, so I'm going to leave it a bit longer as is. I'm not going to put it under too much load for now, but I will progressively load it, because if it fails again, then we're in no point land anyway. This bridge isn't ideal. It needs kind of curving ideally to shape. I don't know if you can see it very well. It hangs out, it doesn't follow the curve. So really we'd want a bridge that is the right height but also follows the curve of the body. It's not the end of the world, but it looks nicer if it touches all the way across, and would theoretically transfer the vibration of the strings a little bit better. But again, that's a fine-tuning part of the deal. Okay, so I'm going to switch off now and come to another one. See you back with the Antoria another time. Welcome back. Just have to always look sideways to check. That's the limitation of this camera. Maybe I'll stick a little mirror on the side so I can... Will that even work? Yeah, it would work, wouldn't it? But then it would be in the way of the microphone. I don't know. Anyway, welcome back. This is... oh, blimey. Jay's Antoria, that's what I meant to do. I was thinking, what was I switching the camera on for? Now, I've had this thing here sitting in the workshop for quite some time, as you've probably seen on loads of videos, and it's an old Antoria from the olden golden days, and Jay brought this, and I kind of yes, he brought it over, didn't he? Yeah. Sorry, it's so long ago now, and it was all over the place. It wasn't playable, or didn't look like it would be even fixable. Mainly because I think you've already got the video to show this. But anyway, this bit had all kind of pulled out, so this had fallen in and this had expanded out or distorted out that way. And as a result, the whole action was pretty much unsavable. Now, fairly short order back then, I glued these parts together and have been basically just left it for the last 2 or 3 months, because Jay wasn't in any hurry for it, but I wanted to make sure that it was going to stay and hold in place. Now, so far it has done that pretty well, hasn't gone anywhere else. Obviously it has pretty significant curvature in it, which well, you can't really show you with the straight edge, but if you just follow the line of the strings, you can see how much curve is in there. Now, this proudly proclaims that it has a trussed neck, but it doesn't have an adjustable truss rod, so it's, as far as I can see, it's pretty much a piece of metal in there, if you're lucky, which means that if we want this thing to play with a better action, then we're going to, I mean, you could think about reducing this bridge, that's one of the ways, but even when you do that, you still, even if the strings were touching down here, you've still got a huge gap here because of the curvature of the neck. So really the only other way of this standing a chance of playing again is to do a bit of planing or sanding this down to remove the curvature a little bit. There's no steaming you can do to it, there's no nothing like that. So that was the plan if anything was possible. If this, first of all, if this held, which it has, then it may well be we can take this and flatten it out. Now what I don't know, by the way, is what will happen when I take the loading off. And so the first thing I will do is photograph it, or I will do some photographs, and I will also make a measurement of the scale of the curvature, so I can kind of, I may not be able to draw it precisely accurately, but at least I'll know what the measurements were at each fret under load. Now if we take the strings off next and then we find it flattens out, we still kind of have an idea of how much we're going to need to take off. I think it's highly unlikely that when we take the pressure off this is going to go flat, and I think from the two previous ones I've done, it's always a bit of a hit and miss thing, because you have to do the work without it being under tension. So the question is, how do I do it? How much do I flatten it? And then what will happen when I reload it? So I found with the previous two that flattening this completely worked pretty well, because once it got loaded again, it then from flat it pulled enough, just about enough curvature or relief into the neck. But clearly this is too much, but as I say, I think what we'd probably find is it would be there even when we take the strings off, and we can demonstrate that anyway. So first thing I'm going to do is get my marker pen of sorts, and again I'm not going to do much on this tonight because it's getting later, but I will sort of check. Now the way I'm going to, what am I going to do? I think I'm just going to, let's mark it at a number of points. I was wondering if clank. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to count, because by the way, that's just my frets hitting the board that sounded so bad. I'm not going to put anything on because this lacquer is also quite worn or weathered, so it's probably not very strong. So what shall we choose? Well, we'll go first fret. So before and after. So loaded and unloaded, and then we're going to go. Let's go first, third. Let's go first, third, 7, 3, 4, 5, 6. First, third, 6. So first fret, third fret, 6th fret, 9th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 16th, and last. That's maybe a bit over the top, but I like to see what we've got. Technically, if I could be really bothered, I could you could draw it out on graph paper if that's your thing. Okay, so we're going to go in millimeters, and we're going to go do more light. Okay, so first. So 1.5 loaded, so 1.5 at the first fret. I'm going to switch glasses. 1.5, and then we said what third? Blimey. I call it 3. Third, 4, 5, 6. 6th fret. Oh my. I know it's going to be shocking, this. I've got to kind of keep track of where I am. 5. That's 5. 5 5 millimeters at the 6th fret, and 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, and we're going to 7, 8, 9, 5, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12. It's kind of straightening out here. 6 still, maybe a tiny bit difference. 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, it's probably reducing fractionally now. 6 again, and at the last fret. Just over 6, so 6.2, something like that. Okay, so that's the first part of this. Now, let us remove these strings. Now, what this is going to require is, of course, pulling all the old frets and refretting it, and you know, that's what I discussed months ago when Jay first brought this to me. So it would need, you know, full refret, along with the repair to the body. So it was a sentimental value type of thing. So it's, you know, it's obviously the guitar like this doesn't have the there's no economic sense or argument for putting a lot of money into this. It's only a yeah, I guess sentimental value, and I think Jay wanted to bequeath this to his son. Now, another point here is this is flattened out over the years, and it may well make more sense to buy another one and custom shape it. Much rather it's sat, you know, it's sat more. It's not too bad, but we need to shape it a bit more to get it sit nicely on there. Okay, so of course the problem I've got now is with the what do we call it, the loading off. I still need to keep one of these strings on. Keep one of these strings and just tension it up, not to load the neck, but just to kind of get a straight string. So I mean, it's never going to be completely unloaded, otherwise it'll just kind of belly onto the ground. But so you can see there's quite a difference, i.e. the first thing that we can see is that this string is now oh, of course the bridge is out of the way. Yeah, there's quite a difference because the bridge is gone. You spotted that, didn't you? Nobody told me. Right, let's just do that again. Right, now we're expecting it to flatten out a bit, so we don't really want it under any load, but we don't want it, you know, flopping down. Okay, so but interestingly, my prediction was that we'd see pretty much the same curve, because I think that the curve in here is permanently there after so many years, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's pretty much exactly the same. Okay, so first one we're looking at 3. How that? Have I gone crazy? Has that possibly gone up? Why would that wouldn't have gone up? Well, it's not 3 either. I'm talking about it's 1.5. I'm looking at the numbers up there. 1.5. Sorry, it's been a long day. 1.5. Fret number 3. 3. Yeah, same. Fret number 6. Okay. 2, 5, 3. Hang on a sec. 2.53, 4, about 4.5, something like that. It was a little bit less than before, so there was a bit of curvature. That makes sense. 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we're looking at 5. Yeah, 5. So we're a little bit less there again. So the majority of the bend in here is permanent. That's what this is telling me, as kind of predicted. So 12. Again, sitting at 5 now. I think we'll just see the same thing. 13, 14, 15, 16. No, it's about 5. Yeah. So, and in a way, 5. Okay, so that's really encouraging. I guess what it tells us straight away is the effect of loading on this neck as it currently stands. So you can see that it's almost the same. That's the fully loaded one, and that's the unloaded one. There's pretty much at any point it's the same down at this end, and in the middle where you'd expect probably to see most of the bend difference, you're seeing about 1 millimetre in the action difference, right? And that means the bulk of that high action is permanent curvature, which is what I found with the other ones after all their many years. Now, strangely enough, I am going to keep these because I think anyway these were a spare set that I had, cheap set I suppose. I think I put these on. Ooh, yeah, because I didn't chop them short, so they were probably never real strings. They were only ever sacrificial strings. Alright, so yeah, so what that means is that the curvature is permanent, which, although it sounds like a counterintuitive, that's a really good thing, because it means that it's taken probably 50 years to get to that state under almost permanent loading or nearly constant loading. This is the hard bit, getting these strings out through these little tiny holes. Yeah, permanent loading, so we should be able to flatten it, and what will happen is, of course, it will bend again once we put it under tension, but we've already seen approximately by how much it will bend. Right. Now, of course, if we thin it down a little bit, which I will be doing naturally, if we take anything off there, we've just slimmed it down a small fraction, then that's going to allow it probably to bend a tiny bit more, because it's a bit less rigid. Oh, don't do this to me. You do want to come out of here. You do want to come out of here. Come on. Trying to do two things with one hand. Yeah, so sanding it down will thin it down as well, technically, and it will allow it to bend a little bit more, but it will be so little that it won't be, I think, a significant issue. I'm a bit concerned that I don't think this one wants to come out at all, and I don't think chopping it off will do much use either, so I've got to find an ultra thin thing, which is about the thinnest one of these things I've got. That's it. Right, so we will keep these for that future usage of, brilliant. I'll put them, I'll do that thing of going, I'm going to remember where I put them, because that's obvious I'll remember, isn't it? Right up here, above the bright light and where it gets hottest. Okay, so now, just to show that this thing doesn't return to flat with the strings off, we can do a more straightforward look, and you can see plenty of fresh air down there. That's between the 0 fret and the end, so it's quite a lot of bend. So now the point is that bend doesn't account for all of that 5 and 6 mils. That was partly to do with how the bridge was set, but the issue is that what mattered was the difference between the loaded amount and the unloaded. That's the only thing. I don't think we weren't condemned to a 6mm action here, and we could adjust the bridge to lower that down, but the amount of curvature as shown by that putting a flat bar across it tells us that's what we need to really eradicate, because it's now permanently curved even with that truss rod in it. So there's no other way of doing that now other than to begin the process of removing the frets. Let's just stand, I tell you what, let's hang this somewhere. You can hang here. Can you hang here safely? Yes, you can. Let's warm up the iron and get on to pulling these out. So we will need to remove, well, technically we might not need to replace the nut. It looks like it's functioning, but we'll pull out all of these frets. Actually, we'll have to take the nut off because we need to get access to sand it all out. So where have I plugged this in? That should be on. Yeah, it's starting to warm. It looks fantastic, this headstock. Look at that lovely kind of splitting lacquer. It's gorgeous. It looks very ancient and proper. So we have a choice when it comes to it. We can, well, we'll pull these. Note at this point it's probably worth doing a quick measurement. Not that we're going to necessarily use the same frets, but I just want to see the amount of difference between the 0 fret and the other frets, and that gives us again another gauge of when we come to replace them. We need to build in that difference. Okay, so there comes the nut. I'm off to one side, and that allows me a bit of room to measure. Now this fretboard is quite thick, so we have a fair amount of room to sand it down. So I'm just going to draw these. It's the easiest way of me remembering. 0 fret, we've got showing us 282 crown, and the important bit is the height above 153, let's say. That's quite difficult to measure, and then the regular frets being smaller, and we'll go for 225. It doesn't look that much smaller. 220, oh, sorry, it looks much smaller than the measurement tells. 225, and then the typical height. It's not very scientific. We got 1.3 versus 1.5, 1.3. So it tells us sort of 0.25, quarter of a millimetre difference in height. I think it would probably be wise to do several versions of that, because I think it's measured in different places. That's 176, that's 160, 173, 160. I'm going to go with, that's sticking up proud actually, so that's not a very good measure of it. It's probably a better measure there. 127. See, it all depends on getting this thing correctly, you know, right angles to a curved board, which isn't very easy. So I'm going to call that 1.6 as my measure. That's an average, and then we'll just try and keep this perpendicular and call that 1.3, which is what I've got. So it's a 0.3 millimetre difference, which is enough. And actually that's interesting, because that accounts for precisely the first fret action that I would normally aim for anyway. So there we go. So with this thing warmed up, I'm now going to just go straight into it and pull out these gammy old frets. And what that allows me to do then is, once I've pulled those, from there onwards, I can take my time and sand out the board whenever I've got a free few minutes. So that just ping, drops out, no resistance at all. Now these are going to be a little bit harder because they're flatter, and actually kind of not really easy to do this without getting a bite under here. Realistically, just looking at how these are being put in, I don't think I need the heat. If you see this, they're just tink straight out. So they were never put in with any glue, that's for sure. All those years ago, that was just pressed in. So I'll turn the heat off because it's entirely unnecessary. So you have to get that little bite at the beginning, a gentle lever upwards, and out they come. Unless you can't get that start point correctly, which is quite a challenge. There you go. Now we can put any gauge of frets in that we want. The only consideration is that the 0 fret has to be X amount bigger, and I would say at least 0.3 taller a gauge in order to provide that first fret action, correct first fret action. But yeah, these are amazing. These were only ever pressed in. It's very good that they did it like that in the olden days. Now if you get to this point and no, I just about got it, but if you did fail to get a bite at this end, then you have to turn around and you've got one more shot at the other end. If that doesn't work, then you have to start getting clever with a blade and getting some lift underneath the crown. But yeah, these, I mean, the truth is you could pull these with a blade anyway. Let's see where they've gone. Yeah, so get in there with blade and then just lever up the edge. See that? Not ideal, well, it's just harder, but you can do it. Yeah, they're just jumping out these. Come on. Sometimes you can just do that and scrunch up the end and it becomes impossible, so you have to switch sides and get it wrong again. It's a combination of downward force and gripping force. Sometimes you could, if you're worried about making any dents and dings on the edge here, because that's where your fingers will feel it most, then you could pull them all from the top edge if you're a right-handed player, if you get what I mean. Right, so here's the fun bit. How do we sand this down? Well, I'm not going to do it right now, but I'll give you an example of how I will do it. And it's remarkably simple, except I've gone and pretty much mangled this with my router. How did I manage that? Note to self, either sand this flat or buy another one. I mean, this would do for this job, but it is basically flat. Let me just check. I don't know how, I was doing something and I managed to grind. Oh wow, that's pretty poor. I managed to grind the edge of it with my router. So, didn't do much for the router bit either, so I do need to buy another one of these. Or I could use 2 halves of this bit. Anyway, the point being is we get some sandpaper on here, and you see all of this gap, we just keep going until such times as we get down to a flat. Now, you know, the argument might be, why don't you use a radius block? Well, we could get a radius block and do a lot of heavy work here, and that's true, and actually that might be a good idea, and then just come back and try and see, you know, use this to both sand and check for flatness. The difference is, I mean, with radius block, you're kind of making it up. You're just guessing. You're just trying to physically take off more at this end. But then you know, this is having a beam of some kind to check how that's working is a good idea as a sort of second stage. It's also possible. I don't know what the radius is on this. It's also possible, if you wanted to plane it, if you feel capable or confident enough. Now, this is an incredibly tight radius. Oh my word! This is almost unplayably tight radius, really, and it changes. That's the funny part. It's a compound radius. How did they manage to do that in those days, eh? Now that obviously I can't reproduce, so we're going to have to settle for a compromise, and clearly the compromise is not, the compromise will be, I think, a 9.5, right, which means it's going to flatten out this quite a bit, and it's going to round this, flatten out this and round that off, so it's an in-betweenie. But the good point, of course, is that we're going to have to lose quite a lot of this material anyway. But it's not, obviously, it's not authentic, because it is. Now, honestly, was this made as a compound radius? I don't know. You know, if you can find the information on this, then you know, you'll do better than me. The question is, as well, is this in any way twisted? And it's not significantly. It's just curved more than anything else. Okay, I'm going to leave it for now because that's today's bit done. But that's the sort of the only hope we've got for it, because, like I say, with bending like this, there's almost no hope of steaming that into. You know, you won't undo 50 years of loading in even a couple of weeks of steaming. It would just be impossible, really. So far as I've experienced. Of course, the other thing we could do to kind of speed this along the way a bit is we could take off a fair bit of material by using scrapers. Which size got? So that's one way of we could be getting rid of a fair bit of material. I just sharpened these, burnished them. That's so clever. Now I'm kind of keeping my mind tuned into the fact that I know that I've got a lot of excess curvature at this end, so I'm going to need to take away a fair bit of material here. And it's a bit noisy for now this time of night, but you can see that that's one technique, and I can sort of physically flatten this out a little bit with something like this, and also staying only at this end because I know that I've got this curvature so I'm going to need to take quite a lot off here before we then eventually move into the middle and meet up when we've finally got it dead level again, knowing that when we put it under load, of course, it is going to curve a bit, and we know that it's going to curve by a millimetre, which, if you consider a millimetre of relief in a neck, that's actually quite a lot. Normally you might be looking at, on an electric guitar, you might be looking at 0.3 maximum. So it all sort of feels to be within the tolerances that we would expect. But this is, you know, it's a destructive process, but we're in that place where at the moment we don't really have any choice, because it's beyond, it's kind of beyond saving really as a neck. But as you can see, I would be looking to remove material from this middle part here, and in quite some volume from this end, which we can then, you know, obviously follow up with a radius block or a beam treatment. But I'm kind of freehanding it here to try and flatten out this extreme radius this end. But already, you know, well, it won't have changed too much, but already we'll start to have a different profile here. Now what was that, sub 725, so we're kind of getting to the 725 area. We could keep checking and keep working, but I think a daytime job with this is going to be better. Like I say, if you're really good with the plane, you could plane, or if you had small planes. I'm hopeless with a hand plane. I don't know why. I'd much prefer to do it with a mixture of a decent one of these. I must go and, God, how could I have trashed that so badly? I mean, actually I could use this for now, since this middle bit would be in the bit we don't need to flatten at all, so I could work with this for quite some time before we ever notice the absence of this. So I'll probably use, rather than go and buy a new one tomorrow, I'll probably, for this job, I'll use this as long as I can, and then by the time we meet in the middle, we're pretty much flat anyway. And we could use a radius block to finish that off with. Now the radius block, as I said, we're going to go 9.5, so we can load up a radius block. Oh yeah, well, let's just kind of show you what I would do. Let's get a 9.5 radius block. Now we need to take, we're sort of looking at taking a lot of material off, so this is a pretty hefty thing at this point in time. So what we want to do, this has already got some on there, but it's much finer than I need for now, so I need this, not very good, I need this 80 grip. So you can either put it on and hold it on manually, or it's all this felt on the ground, so it's covered in sawdust, which isn't so clever, or you can do your homemade double-sided sticky tape homemade job, and I'm going to stick that on there, using the underlying stuff now as a bit of padding really more than anything. These have gone very blunt. Okay, get on there. This double-sided stuff is always incredibly useful. Okay. Now, no point having this dangling over the edge, so I'm going to just cut off any excess for now. And then this will just be, this will turn this standard 80 grit sandpaper, whoops, if I just keep it on track, this will turn this into sort of self-adhesive style that you'd pay a fortune for probably. And that might not be exactly lined up, but hey, so you want to get it pressed down onto the curved surface first and then around the corner afterwards. So again, a way of at the stage of taking off a lot of material without having to be too precise about where you're going. We know we're aiming for 9.5, and so basically so you can see that that's cutting a lot, starting in a strip and then widening up as it comes down here, which is exactly what we'd expect to see given what we know about both the thingy of the neck, radius, and its curvature. So basically just a matter of trying to keep it in one place without too much banging about, and I'm trying to just work downwards from the top at this stage. Now the reality is, as we're doing this, you will see the markers getting worn away, and it may be that we wear them out completely, so we have to be prepared to put new markers in. It's just the price we got to pay. to restore this to a playing condition. But if I get the thing on it now, well, look at that, with the rough stuff we're much closer to that than we were before. But again, you know, if you can sort of find a way to jam it somewhere so it can stay still, which this isn't, but it's what you ideally want. And you're sort of just working out a way. And like I say, we're conscious that not only do we want to, we're doing two jobs at once, we want to remove some volume here to take this end down as well as the other end, but we're also trying to take it off the top and then bring it into a consistent radius, which is, as I say, sadly not authentic, but we don't really have much choice in the matter. I'm kind of using a bit of levering here, which is a bit naughty, but anything to hold this thing in place. Will that do it? No, that's not good. Too tall. Not right, too much. Well, we'll see. Just want to have a little bit of pressure so I can hold it in place and do that. Basically, you would carry on doing that. Now obviously by the time we get to the end, this end is, the fingerboard at this end is going to look thinner than it is in the middle, and it's going to look thinner at this end too, so it'll look fatter in the middle. But that again is the price we have to pay in order to restore playability to this, because there is no other way of doing it. But you can sort of see now we're approaching, we're going to get down to the 9.5 radius at this end. Again, at this point it's sort of more, love it, more by eye, and every now and then obviously you'd want to get your proper flat edge out and you'd have a look and see what's changed, and actually, you know, that's not so bad. And then you'd want to go down to this end. Again, this one's finding ways to support this starts to get interesting, because that doesn't really make much difference. It's not really going to do us any good. So obviously we're going to take some off this end and we're going to go and reshape this, hopefully. And at this point I'd expect it to cut at the edges, which it is doing, because it's overall flatter than this, so we need to cut those edges so that they bring it into a rounder profile. Again, just concentrating my attention on this end, just looking at what it's doing. Again, it's in a way it's the opposite. This end cut in a wedge, expanding up that way. This end is left a wedge, so it's the opposite. Again, you know, whatever way you can handle the guitar to get it to do what you want. I'm sort of putting a bit of a jam under there. Again, I'm concentrating on both those things at once, taking more volume off here, so I'm kind of pushing down at that end to take some of the height out of it, and also concentrating on rounding it out. But you can see it's starting to definitely starting to rework the fingerboard, and this looks thicker anyway at this end, so there's quite a lot of room to take stuff off there without the guitar looking, or the fingerboard looking too thin. And it, you build up a fair old load on there, but it's a very rough grain, and you can keep going quite a long time before you need to change. So we're now at a point where you start to really pick out the areas that haven't been touched. So there's kind of an area there, there's an area there, an area there, area there, a bit there, and it's kind of the bits that stay shiny, and it's as those decrease in size, as you're getting to where you want with the radius, and then you're sort of looking at the straightness. So with a good 80 grit paper, it's not going to take forever. Again, the other thing to keep an eye on is that the neck isn't perfectly, it's not twisted, but it wants to tip over this way, and maybe the back is slightly different shape. Mind you, I'm not exactly on a solid surface here, so either support it, or like you see, that doesn't sit straight, that's straight, kind of by default wants to sit off centre, tilts over because the back is slightly rounded too. So again, you have to, when you do this kind of thing, you're going to have to just sort of guess at the straight position. It's all going to be hand done, frankly, and there's no way of being absolutely precise, but the guiding principle is that whatever you achieve with this is going to be better than it was when you started. Because frankly, when you started, it wasn't playable. So again, just reverting to my straight edge, and that's already the amount of curvature now is starting to reduce down. You can't really see it, but the amount of fresh air showing through there is much less. Now I'm going to concentrate a bit heavier on this end now, because it's still quite curved compared to the attention I've given to the other end. That's good. I'm nearly there, and just a shiny patch at this end. Well, not nearly there, but we're getting there pretty quickly. Oh yeah. Now I'm almost running out of fresh air. There's a bit in the middle still, but we're definitely getting there. So anyway, I'm going to put a halt on this because I'm going to go and see how Claire's doing. She's off to Edinburgh tomorrow for the best part of a week. So anyway, Jay, I hope that was interesting. And by the way, when it comes to it, once I've taken this down to where it's going to stop, then I'm going to sand it smoother, and then I'm going to recut the slots, and then we're going to look at the fret wire to refret it, and then we're going to have a brand new neck. Now of course, as I say, it will go into curvature once it's loaded again, and in 50 years time we can expect it to have curved that much again. But if you get another 30 years, 20-30 years out of it, then it will have been worth it. You can't expect these things to last forever. Alright, see you again for the next part tomorrow. Hey, well, look where we've got to. Flat neck, artificially flattened neck, as you know. I think there's nothing real about that. Meaning, it just takes a certain amount of sanding out to get it to where it needs to be. And the question is, how deep do we need the thingies to be, fret slots? Actually not very deep at all, is it? That wasn't very good. Let's try that again. So what I'm going to do is just stick that in there like that for a minute, and then that there like that. Look at the difference. Difference being not quite the height of the tang, so that will need a little bit more sawing out. So that's what I'm going to do with this thing, but I'm not going to do it now. But you can see that we're nearly there. This thing, it's not very good shape anymore. It's sort of lost its curviness, and I don't really know what's the best way to do, or best thing to do with that. Realistically, it would look better if it was shorter. Really, it just would be sticking up at the ends. Apart from buying a new one, there's not really much way of changing the shape of this. It's pretty crudely filed down underneath here to try and change the shape of it a little bit. I mean, it's not essential. I just don't. It offends mine eye. Anyway, that's one thing. But the other thing that I've noticed is this joint here has got it's got a little bit of splitting going on now. I don't know whether there is a bit of space in there, so really that needs some gluing in there too. The question is how much can I open it up to get glue in if we're going to really seek to make this stronger. This is a two-piece thing anyway. There will be a bit of play in it to press down. I'm nervous about going too far on that, but as I say, the only chance we've got is to clamp this together about now, so that's something I'm going to investigate. Probably do it off camera anyway, but you can just see there's a little bit of the lacquer split here, so there's the join here isn't very good. It's going to obviously come under a lot more load when the strings are on, so probably could do with bending it back and trying to force a bit of glue into there. Force, I mean, try to squeeze a bit of glue in there and then clamp it shut. But that's going to take a little while to wick that into there, and I guess I would use wood glue for that, which is good for sticking it but hard for getting it to go into an area like that. So what I'll probably try and do is get some paper in there and see how that behaves, and if I can get some paper in there I can sort of possibly drag some glue in there with it. Yeah, it's quite a big, well, there's enough to, you can spot how it's coming apart, so I could put a little bit of leverage on that and get as much glue as possible in there, and obviously it'll make a mess all the way around as usual, but that actually comes off quite easily. I might try and find something really thin like a feeler gauge and see if I can just get it further in to get the glue in there as well. But anyway, like I said, that's an off the camera thing. So apart from that, this is overall looking quite nice, grubby, and these are good clean. Bit of potentially, I don't know if we're going to be able to lacquer repair these bits here that I've glued back together again. I was just checking them the other day to make sure they're actually stuck together, but they seem pretty good, and they've held up under string pressure for at least 2 months. So okay, so I guess the next bit I'll come back when I'm fretting this. That'll be the next stage, and I haven't worked out what frets I'm going to use on it yet, but I guess it will be some jumbo ones. I could use gold, but I'm going to save the gold for a special neck of mine, I think. So maybe some last bit of jumbos. It's time I get some more anyway from Stew Mac. Alright, so that's a quick update. Back in a minute. Well, just while I'm here, I suppose, I'm just unpacking something I've had in a box for a little while, and this is just like a little interlude, and I don't know where I'll put this bit of video, but just sort of grab bits of video. Evo Gold, Jescar Evo Gold, very hard gold fret wire, and I've had it sitting around, and I can't remember, I just bought it to have it kind of in reserve really. But the question I had in my mind was, what was I going to do with it? Now, what I was going to do with it was going to end up possibly, I've got this, actually what is a pretty looking neck that I rescued from a Chinese horror, and actually I'm really pleased with how that came out. This was donated by Robbie, and it really was a monstrosity of a maple neck, which I stripped back and then refinished. Again, reshaped and refinished. So it was a strat neck, now it's a telly neck with a strat thingy. So it could well go on to a strat body that's coming. And then, in fact, I think it might just well do that. And then I realised I've got some rusty made in Korea pickups here, but actually I don't think they're really that good by all accounts. Those came off JT's thing. Of course, I forgot even to send them back or ask them if he wanted them. Typical thoughtless me. I can't remember what I did this at though. I guess it would have been 12. Yes, look at that. He did it to 12. Why did I do it to 12? Because I didn't want any note bending hassles. So that means I am looking to bend this. Well, I say I'm looking to bend it at 12, but it's almost 12 to begin with. Actually, it's not entirely true. It's really 9.5. but the problem is getting us across to the old bender later. The hard part is that I don't want to waste any, but also I don't want to bend it out. So how far off are we from the 12s? What do we do if we put 12? See, that is a little bit overpressed. Yeah. No, you see, we want to be strict, as strict as possible. It's kind of hard to work with a great big coily thing like this. So we sort of go over here-ish, or somewhere. Now, I can probably sort of help unbend it a little bit. Put it in here and see what we've got. Let's try and sort of stretch it out a bit and see what the default is if I bend it and put it through. What are we on? Come on then. Yeah, fraction over. So fraction over. So let's take this from here, turn it that way, the tiniest bit. You can see it's really a guesstimate time here. So what we can do is bend this back out as much as possible to the sort of nearly flat, and then put it back through under a new setting. Meanwhile it's bending over and flopping everywhere, but that's not so important. Now, did I overcurve that or undercurve it? Huh? Undercurve it. I don't know, but it's fighting me. That's nearly there. It's very, very close. Let's do, start at this end. Come here. Let's flatten this out. So yeah, anyway, so I don't know, it's really challenging for me because I keep making these things like this that I just like too much and end up wanting to keep. But actually I shouldn't be afraid of making them good and selling them. You know, in other words, I shouldn't try to keep everything in the whole world. Right, I'm going to send this whole lot through. I mean, what I tend to do is I tend to make prototypes. weird as that must look. Yeah, so I make prototypes which I then fall in love with because they play so well, or they're so good to hold, or whatever. Alright, that's close to, well, what is it? Is it 10? Actually, it's about 10. It's dead on 10, really. It's dead on 10. What am I saying? I need it flatter, don't I? Flatter. So I'm actually probably going, am I going the right way or the wrong way? I'm going the right way. I'm pulling it flatter. So this should, let's put it through one more time. Yeah, anyway, I've just got a feeling already that as soon as I put this gold stuff on that neck, I'm just going to fall completely in love with it and never want to let it go. It's a bit difficult to work in big coils like this that are all over the place, but that's still a little over coil. I mean overbent. I mean another way of doing it is to cut the cut in half, or just do a little bit of kind of gentle manual bend here, just to stretch it out a little bit. It's a very small amount, but let's see what we've got. Yeah, see, even then it's still just on the mark. It's not far off. Yeah, you could still bend it a little bit more out. Like I say, it's difficult to manipulate. It wants to stab you. The reason I'm trying to do it as one piece to begin with is that to do it any other way, you tend to lose the. I'll tell you what. Let's not beat around the bush here. Let's flatten it as much as possible, and then we'll put it back through the mangle. And it's no big deal. Yeah, it's difficult to. Yeah, the reason I don't want to cut it to length is I'll inevitably cut it somewhere mid fret, as it will turn out to be. And if I do that, then we kind of just lose a bit of fret wire. So in a way, that's almost there. Let's go from a little bit flatter and then run it through there and get it even at least. Work in such long lengths, but yeah, that's very close, so I'll live with that. Yeah, so the idea is, if I'm going to do this lovely neck, I'm going to undercut this and fill the ends. Alternatively, I could cut it and finish right to the ends with the metal showing. That's another way of doing it. But that way is a bit more costly in metal. I think I might have mentioned why before. The problem with this is I can't actually get very good reach to the length. So if I do an undercut business, I can cut pretty close to the required length, because the undercut part will take away the sort of gnarled curly end bit that you get when you snip with these things here. So it's quite difficult to get in there and cut. So especially if you're trying to work out which fret you're on. So maybe I can help myself. 1, 2, 3. It's not a terribly accurate way of doing it. I'm sure I'm going to miss one out now. 4. This is, say, very brittle, this Evo Gold, but it is Very nice. It looks absolutely brilliant. Makes a quality neck once you've done it. And I actually think this hand finished telly strap neck deserves this quality of wire. And as I've got a donor strap body coming, which would fit this neck perfectly, there's absolutely no reason why 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. There's no reason why not to put decent quality fret wire on it to make it look the absolute best. When I did this on the last one, I ended up keeping, I have to confess. I also splurged on gold Clousson style, vintage Clousson style tuners, which I think absolutely suited it perfectly. But I think these might end up sitting on chrome, or alongside chrome, since I have a spare set, and probably, let's see, I need 2 more. Yeah, I've got a spare set of chrome ones sitting here right now doing nothing. Whew. It's humid today and yesterday. So here's what we will end up looking like. Now, what I did here is I sort of manually cleaned the slots as I went, but they may still require, for this to work best, they may still require a bit of a sawing, but you can start to see how good that looks on a maple neck. It's absolutely tip top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get these all lined up, just check they're all long enough and the right number in total, and then I'm going to grab them off on a bit of my fly paper, sticky tape, hang them out of the way, safe. Unlike the last lot, which I hung and then they fell down on the floor, and I lost one of the frets. I'm a jumbo fret short. That's quite good, as you've got quite a large amount of fret wire left. I don't know why I'm trying to fit these in, because actually, quite frankly, I need to widen the holes anyway. So let's just line them where they belong. I'm stalling for time because I should be doing Rich's Harley Benton SC550, the gorgeous looking single cut, top of their range actually. I underestimated it in my pricing on the video just a minute ago, yesterday, aka yesterday. I'm one short that. See, I've confused even myself. Yeah, it's I think the retail price at the moment is about 216 quid new. There we have them. Beauty. Oh, look at that. Now the spares are kicking about over here, attached to what was the spare tuners, I should say. What was the marlin neck, which I sort of redid, but it's got a few scars, so I would only use it for something for fun, really. Well, it looks good from here, but it isn't all that good. But I do have a great set of vintage tuners, just dying to be sacrificed and swapped over to there, which I'll do. Meantime, we'll get our fret holding paper. Or let's just, while I'm at it, let's do the fun bit. I don't know why, but I like to do it this way around. I get all this left over. The problem is, it keeps me buying more because I don't know how much that will actually do. It's about a third. If that took 2 of those, then I need another one of these. So I need another set of wire of the same size to do another thing. Or I don't know how far I'd get with that. Not a whole one, that's for sure. So what I would do, in order to, yeah, I mean I could draw this, but it's when you crunch this with these, you get a twist in the tang, and if you want to cut this back and use this, and a lot of guitars have it where the metal goes right to the edge so that the tang fills the slot, that's fine, but if you don't want that little twist in it, you basically have to either cut it a lot longer so that you basically are with the filing block, you are filing off the twisted bit, and by the time you get back flush with the fingerboard, you're through to the vertical tang, so the gnarled bit's been shaved off. Or you do it this way, in which case you take off a bit and do an overhang, and kind of square off the end, and then you can sort of line that up. See, it needs a bit widening here, but you can kind of line it up and see where it sits, and then cut the other side to fit. But it's quite a nice little thing of just going all the way down one side, tidying up these ends. And the tidier they are, and the flusher they are to the edge, the easier it will be to file them back once they're pressed in. Now, as I say, these are clearly the jumbo frets, ultra jumbo really, so they're saying I'm not fitting in those slots at the moment until you widen them, so I'll do some off camera really, because it's just a boring thing. It's also something you've got to be very careful with. We've got a nice finish to that fingerboard at the moment, and any sawing can be, it's quite hard to saw and do it without slipping and gouging chunks out of the lacquer and stuff. It's not an easy process. It wouldn't be so bad if it was a little circular electrical saw, like a miniature Dremel thing. And there are, I mean, obviously there's a Dremel cutting wheel, but you really can't use it for something like this. It's a shame, because I'd love to be able to make this part easier. What I'll probably do is go down the top of here with a V-notch file, just to kind of open up the notch a bit so it's not so hard to locate with the saw blade, and then I'll use the Japanese fret slot saw. You see, this is too tight to fit that in really. Yeah, I'll use the fret slot saw to cut a wider thing. This was a challenge in a way, because this was one of the first necks that I did after getting the buffer. And previously, because I couldn't buff the necks if I refretted and refinished them myself. Oh yeah, this is, oh no, just hold that thought a minute. This is that last part of the video. Huh, sorry. Anyway, okay, now I know where I am. I've forgotten that I was making a video called refretting or upcycling a neck, and this is the last part. Anyway, yeah, previously, before having the buffer, I would hand refinish necks, but obviously not to, first of all, not to a very high sort of level finish. It was always difficult to get, and impossible to get them glossy finish. But all the while when I was doing it, I never quite worked out which was best: to lacquer the board, polish it out as best as possible, or flat it back, polish it out as best as possible, and then cut the slots. Or, because I tried that once, and what happened was, because the slots filled with lacquer or poly or whatever, nitro, it kind of got ripped out by the saw, and it was messy, and it just didn't seem to work very well. So the next time, or this time, I decided to, no, that's actually cut too short. I decided to, glad we got some spare, eh? I decided to clean the slots out as I went, and I had already tried that a couple of times before, and when I did it, I tried filling it with little plastic inserts to block the slots, because of course the problem is, how do you keep the finish out of the slot? And so with this one, I did the long-winded process of hand lacquering it, and each time, every time I put a coat on, basically, I went down all the slots and pulled the goo, the sort of the sticky lacquer out, and let it dry, put another coat on, cleaned out the slots as much as possible, and so on. And it was actually a pain in the backside, but I couldn't see any better way or quicker way around. So once I'd done that and then flatted back the lacquer, or the finish, the poly I should say, we got to where it is now, which happens to be a very fine looking finish, but you can also see that the slots themselves are not very wide. They ended up being cutting blade wide, which is what probably, in fact certainly, what I used to clean them out each time. So it kind of defaulted to that width of slot, which isn't, as I say, clearly isn't big enough. So it will require a bit of widening. But of course, what it does mean, if you can clear the slots as you go, even if like this they're not quite wide enough, what it does mean is that you do end up with a flat finish that you can buff. Because a previous way around, I tried laying the frets in first and then lacquering over the top, and it would be okay if it was the lightest dusting of finish, but I ended up, by hand you end up putting quite a lot of volume on, so it ended up making quite a build up around the edges of the frets. And I've got a couple of necks over there which sort of show that, and it's just not, I mean, it's kind of homespun-ish, but it's not very elegant. Well, it works perfectly well to play, it just looks a bit gloopy. So so it seems that the verdict comes down on the clean the slot as you go, which just is laborious. There's no other way of accounting for it really. It takes time and patience, and but you know, once you've polished it off like this, and now I'm looking at, for the first time, adding frets to a pretty nicely polished, relatively, it's not factory perfect, it never will be, but a fairly nicely glossed and polished board. It feels like a triumph to have rescued this horrible K-Mize maple neck. By the way, don't avoid the K-Mize maple necks. I keep saying this to people on Facebook. Avoid the K-Mize maple. K-Mize paddle necks are actually, oh, I can flop around, I don't really care. The K-Mize paddle necks, like this one, are actually not at all bad. I'm just kind of leaving this to, I don't know what the word is, temper, no, season would be a wood word, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Would be the word for wood, wouldn't it? Season. I'm leaving this season out here in the UK summer, which actually today is pretty humid, but doesn't mean it always is. Anyway, point is that for some reason they get these okay. The frets on this aren't fantastic, but it could be played straight off. Looking down it, I did pick up a spot. There's for example, there's a really high fret there, you know, and it would take a bit of leveling to get that down. But by and large, you could sort of put that on your homemade guitar and, you know, cut headstock and play it. Now, as it is, I'm going to re-fret anyway. I'll probably sand the board down a bit and end up possibly putting more lacquer on here by the time I put a logo and create the shape and so on. So it doesn't really matter to me, but as a basic thing, it's a nice feeling neck. These maple ones, sorry, these rosewood ones, by and large, the frets aren't fantastic. The dots sometimes wander off the center line. This isn't brilliant. This one here is off that way. Lazy, casual. They aren't fantastic, but when you fret them, refret them, and, you know, put a bit of effort into making the frets good, they're actually perfectly good for £25 or something, right? I mean, they're workable. You won't get anything else for £20 to start with. You know, I do like to find an old squire neck or something like that, because an old squire neck I can refurbish as easily as one of those for 25, and at least on the squire neck, the dots are going to be in the right places. That's one thing. Whereas on these, it's a bit hit and miss. So I guess what I'm saying, I'm not really massively recommending them. I'm just saying that if you're going to buy a new neck for 25 quid like that from somewhere like K-Mize. Definitely don't buy the maple one, it's a bit grisly. And if you do buy one, buy the rosewood. The rosewood paddle ones are okay. Where they often fall down, and this applies to the maple and the rosewood ones, is when you buy the sort of fender shaped headstock, and the maple ones are absolutely nothing like a fender, and the rosewood ones, I don't think I've ever bought actually a rosewood pre-shaped one, but I've only ever bought a maple pre-shaped one, but they are nothing at all. They are diabolical, hence that one's been cut up and reshaped into the only decent Fender-esque shape you can get out of a Strat shape, which is a Telecaster, thankfully. Thanks, Leo. Anyway, so I'm cutting the underhang on all these other sides, so these will be ready to press whenever I am, or when I've cut the slots a bit deeper, and whenever I'm in a sort of a mood to turn the camera off and stop doing a setup and do something else. That one might, that's okay. But yeah, so in recycling a neck, upcycling a neck, you know, this one is definitely upcycled, even though it was pretty new, and I think well, it's unplayed, the original that Robbie sent me. So technically it is an upcycle, but you know, it also happens to be new, but it was rejected for the fact that the headstock was wrong or the colour was wrong or something. Anyway, but in effect what I've done to this neck is exactly what I could have done to a tired but basically good Squire Affinity neck or an Indonesian standard neck or something like that. So and I've done it with lots of different guitar necks now, and I have to say most of the quality, quote unquote, budget guitars, you know, like Tanglewood, Squire, Gould, or even, you know, Jim Deacon, Westfield, you know, most of those guitars, what's the other one, Wesley, even, you know, lots of budget guitars out there which are perfectly good necks for upcycling. So this could have been a boring looking Squire neck, and actually, you know, when you look at this thing in the light, it's quite nice, but it's ready to go. This will fit straight into the Strat that's coming. So what I wanted to do is just do a little bit of adjustment here, with a file. I'm just going to sort of file along. I'm just going to basically make a little bit of a notch where the whatchamacallit, that thing, the slot starts. There's quite a lot of lacquer on the edge there, so it's not cutting right through very quickly. It's quite tough because of the amount of layers of lacquer on there. But I just want to open it up a little bit. It's deep enough, I think, but it's not quite wide enough, so it could run a slight risk of pinching the, you know, prising the slot open a little bit. Now, if that happens, if you're working with fret tangs that are just way too big for the slots, what you'll get is effectively a back bow. It'll produce a back bow in the neck, because you'll be pushing the frets in and they will be kind of pushing, and each one pushes a tiny bit, and by the end of it you've got the whole thing will be in a slight state of back bow-ness. So that's why I want to just be sure that this is the best or the right width, and I'll try and do it with the nearest thing. Now, of course, there will be different thicknesses of fret slot saw available to use, and I've only got one gauge, and it's my sort of standard one, and so far it has worked for pretty much everything I've used. I've never found any jumbo frets creating this back bow, so it always seems to have, between the original slot that's there and this saw, it seems to be a fairly good catch-all size, because it would be a pain to have several saws, one for each group of fret tang sizes. That would be a little bit on the downside. Now, the other thing, if you do come across, this isn't a good example, well maybe it is, but yeah, looking at that rosewood neck again, if you do come across a neck like that, I was going to do this off camera, but what the hell. If you do come across a neck like that, with the dots kind of a bit off, you have an option, if you want to replace them. You could get slightly bigger dots and kind of over install them over the, dig out the original ones and put some new ones in. That's not easy, and you can run into some problems fairly quickly doing that, but so it's also a good learning activity. Now, notice I've taken the guard off for depth. Now, depth wasn't really the issue here, it was the thickness of it. I don't know if you can see that first one is now the sort of thickness I would want for this. Let's get this one that I rejected. So I've got this jumbo wire now, and with a bit of luck, that's still got a bit of a twist on it, but let's put it on the edge here. That kind of goes in, it's almost some of the way in. Partly it's because it's got a twist on either end, which I haven't cut off. So let's do that, and then we'll see where it sits, just to be on the precise side. Let's cut it right back, get rid of the tang in the way, and there's a little curly bit here. That's about right. It's just a fake fret because we aren't going to use it. But so that would tap down fairly well, but it wouldn't sit very well in the narrower one. So basically this is just a matter of using this saw without the guides, because I'm not too worried about the risk of overcutting, because I'm unlikely to overcut. I'm kind of following the given slot and making sure I'm increasing the width, and I'm just trying to be as careful as possible. I've got to get into the groove. Boy, you've got to move, whatever was that song, Madonna, get into the groove, boy, you've got to prove your love to me, that one, you know. I've forgotten the words now. Anyway, so I'm starting in the slot, and I'm just being really cautious to stay in the slot, so that it doesn't jump out and mess up this really nice finish. So I'd rather just drag it all the way through and have it come out the other side. Run the risk of skipping it out. So it's a good. Once we've done that, I'll be happy to hang this up and leave it till a fretting evening. But again, it is real care needed with this saw. In the slot, run it across, and it's not really going any deeper. It's just clearing it out a little bit, and I can see a little bit of dust coming out with it, so I can see that it's widening it out a little bit. When it does that, it feels pretty good. Not perfect, but I could probably fret that without any glue. But it's not me, it's not like me at all. But oh, do you know what? Why don't I try it one of these days? I keep sort of doing everything exactly the same way because it worked. How about we try and do this one? How about, careful on the exit there, otherwise you get chip out. Basically a bit comes out. But how about we just try and press these in with no glue at all? I mean, what have we got to lose? Okay, nothing to lose. Sing ta-na-na, ta-na-na. I got diamonds on the soles of my shoes. I remember going to New York